Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Global Youth and Global Counter-Terrorism Council, I, Ayushi Kapoor, Deputy Chairperson of India-Spain Youth Forum and Secretary of Jesus and Mary College Chapter, Global Youth, extend a warm welcome to all those present here. Global Youth, in collaboration with Global Counter-Terrorism Council, is pleased to present to you a panel discussion on role of media and social media in the run-up to January 6th and thereafter. While social media activism brings an increased awareness about societal issues, questions remain as to whether this awareness is translating into a real change or not. The intent of today's discussion is to provide a wider range of knowledge with regards to the role of media and cater to providing concrete perspective for students, not only to gain a wholesome understanding, but also to make an informed offering to the public consultation. We aim to have a conversation and bringing about a positive message in the interest of democracy. Now, I would like to invite Akash to welcome the chair and speakers of the session.
Thank you, Ayushi, for handing over the mic to me. It is said if your action inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a perfect leader in true sense. And today, we are honored to have such amazing leaders amongst us who will guide the session with their insightful words. We are honored and privileged to welcome amongst us Ms. Pranjal Gupta, Chairperson, Advocacy Council, Global Youth India, Ms. Rishwa Shekhar, Member of Security Council, Global Youth India, Mr. Harsh Suri, Vice President of Hindu Chapter at Global Youth India, Mr. Ashraf Nihal, Deputy Chairperson from India-Brazil Youth Forum at Global Youth India, Ms. Neha Ramesh, Research Coordinator at Youth Ambassador at Global Counter-Terrorism Council, Ms. Ragini Pal, Research Coordinator at Youth Ambassador at Global Counter-Terrorism Council, Mr. Jasim Rashid, Research Coordinator and Youth Ambassador at Global Counter-Terrorism Council. Last but not the least, we are privileged to have among us Ms. Aarti Tiku Singh, Foreign and Security Affairs Editor, Indo-Asian News Service, IANS, as a chairperson for the distinguished session. Ms. Aarti is a Kashmiri Indian journalist who is appreciated for their insight on the various issues faced by the people of Kashmir, an alumnus of University of Jammu and Kashmir and of Columbia University. She has more than 18 years of experience in journalism with her insight centered around international relations. We welcome you, ma'am. Now I pass on the mic to the chairperson to continue the session ahead.
Thank you, Ayushi and Akash. Jay Bayer rightly said, content is fire, social media is gasoline, and it's the responsibility of
Wait, Pranjal, the chair will go. Aarti, please over to you.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, GCTC, for giving me this opportunity and privilege to be the chair of a panel which is quite vibrant and quite enthusiastic about the developments since January 6th. I was listening to some of the conversation and some of the debate just before the previous session ended, and I was quite amused by some of the points made by various panelists, including somebody in the panel who said that Trump supporters, Trumpism is not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think that's a very, very important insight, which we will have to factor in when we talk about the role of media and social media in the run-up to the US elections and also January 6th outcome on the Capitol Hill. But before I express my views about the role of media and social media, I think I am going to invite comments from the entire panel. I have been told to make it interactive and also exchange views with the rest of the panel. So I would really like to start with a question for the entire panel, and perhaps one of you can respond, or maybe all of you can respond one after another. But I want to ask that for the longest time, in fact, for the last 10 years, we have been debating on social media about the role of media in overall politics of the world, politics of India, and overall social dynamic. Now we have come to a juncture in history, especially since January 6th, that we are debating the role of social media in not just the developments that took place in the US, but also the uh, the uh, the functioning and overall politics of India. So clearly there's a shift from mainstream media to social media when it comes to our public discourse. But the question to the panel is this: that do you think that social media is essentially an extension of mainstream media? It's essentially a publishing platform which should be treated the way publishers are treated, which should be treated the way mainstream media has been treated as per certain regulations. Some regulations are country specific, some are not really. But there is regulation for mainstream media. However, social media has evaded any kind of responsibility, accountability, and transparency on many issues. And that's the debate that we are having. So I would like our panelists to respond to this question, and then maybe we can move forward from there. Uh, Anyone who is ready to respond to this question can go ahead. Neha, do you want to respond to this question?
Sure, ma'am. So, first of all, thank you everyone for being here. I should say it's an honor to be part of such a dais. Second, and I'd like to move on and answer the question that was posed by Aarti ma'am. Yes, I think social media should be held accountable in a lot of aspects, and we need to legally address the problems and challenges posed by social media and media outlets. Archaic laws can no longer govern a platform that is very advanced and futuristic. But it is also essential to note that the system puts a paramount of stress on the content moderators, and clearly companies and social media platforms do not have the resources to comb through their own material. I mean, statistics show that there are 9,281 tweets per second globally in 2020. So I don't think it is statistically or feasibly, or I'd say economically very viable to sit and comb through all of the content that people choose to put out there. And social media is threading the line between journalism and expressing someone's opinion. Right. So you can't sue someone or you can't hold someone legally liable for an opinion. You can only hold someone legally liable for what they have stated is a fact. And drawing a line and taking this on a case by case basis isn't very viable. And the system the system is programmed to propagate the information that it is fed. Expecting it to do the opposite and making it understand the difference between what we consider to be proper content and improper content is not a viable solution. Although I do think there should be legal repercussions to what we are facing right now, we should be very careful as to how we go about approaching that. Thank you, ma'am.
Neha makes a very interesting point. She said that essentially, that the social media has blurred the line between journalism and opinion, and that too, problematic opinion. And second, she said that Second point, Neha, I forget. Oh, what was the second point you made about why it should be regulated?
Why it should be regulated? Because
Because
people
yeah,
are.
I think I got your point. You said that social media platforms do not have enough
Resources.
resources to actually moderate the entire content. There is like massive content generated by the second across the world, and therefore there is no way to regulate it, no way to moderate it. Would somebody else contest this point of view, or do you think that Neha makes very argumentative points? And do you also think that more than problematic opinion, and more than the fact that yes, you can't really regulate a humongous task like scanning through millions and millions of messages and millions of comments and tweets and Facebook posts and so on and so forth. But do you think that there is a much bigger problem with social media platforms? And I want to uh, now I want to actually address one of the points which was raised in the previous session, that Alexandria Cortez, for example, she's been using social media to the hilt, Ilhan Omar, and all the far left icons, so to say, in the US have milked social media to an extent where it's it's become unmanageable, and it feels like a tsunami of people are really backing these icons, the far left ideology in the US. And you could also say that you have similar right wing icons in the US or in India, or left wing icons in India. When you look at their tweets, when you look at their Facebook posts, and you see the number of likes or retweets or shares, you feel that an entire globe is backing them, an entire world is really endorsing their opinion and their point of view. And you feel that this is what the mainstream opinion is. But when it comes to electoral results, at the end of the day, despite the fact that as I think Ambassador Sibbal made this point earlier in the previous session, that Trump was facing hostility from CIA, from FBI, from big tech media companies, from mainstream media, from the entire establishment. And yet, at the end of the day, when the election results came, honestly, Trump did not lose by a huge margin. He really lost by a very narrow margin. And the fact that at least 50% of the population in the US really believes that it was a fake election, that there was rigging, that there were fake votes, it goes to show that something big, something massive is happening within, not just within the Trump support base, but in the entire United States, where two sections of the same society are so polarized in their thinking and in their views that you can't really say what is real on social media. Because if you go by social media numbers, you will feel that it's one or the other side that is making sense. uh, but election results show that the society in the US is polarized. It doesn't look like that it was one sided the way it seemed on Twitter or Facebook. It doesn't show, the social media today does not show us the reality that really is on the ground. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, may I comment on that?
Anybody in the panel? The question is open to anyone.
Okay, so thank you everyone for inviting me to the panel. Um,
I would, starting from what Neha would actually said, that, the task is humongous. It's very difficult actually to, to monitor all the tweets and then all the posts that are there on the social media. But more than the task being difficult, I would like to say that, we should not monitor them, because the entire idea of, the social contract, going back to Rousseau and Locke, the idea, the modern democracies function on the ideas that human beings are rational beings. They know, how to act. And if we are shaking up the pillars of, banning certain, I'm not saying that you should not ban anyone, or there are certain sections, of course, leaving aside that, but on a whole, talking about it, as they are rational beings and they should be allowed to speak. And as ma'am, you rightly said that, what is there on the social media, and when the election results actually come, we find that what social media is telling us is not what is on the ground. That is because on social media, very few, let's say, the people, not everyone has the resources, or we post more radical views on social media than actually comes to the ground. And that is where our rationale comes into being, the whole idea of social contract, considering humans to be actually able to take decisions for themselves. So the whole idea about it should be kept in mind while talking about social media. So yes, indeed, social media is creating, there are certain sections which are creating problems, and there are far rightists and leftists on it, which create a lot of debates and discussions and trending every other day. But then at the end of the day, social media is, just take it like this: there is a knife, and that knife can be used to cut a vein and can also be used to cut an apple. So it is up to us how we actually use it. Ban certain people, just banning that now there will be no knife available in the market because a certain section is cutting the veins. I don't think that would make sense. So
So, couple of points.
Oh, sure.
Couple of points. I just want to summarize the points she made. One is that banning will not help, because or regulating will not help, because it's a humongous task and people have different points of view. People are free, or should be free, to express their points of view, because that's what democracies really are meant to be. And the second point, I think she made, I think just she reinforced or agreed with my point of view, that social media is projecting a picture which may not necessarily be true on the ground. So my question to, unless somebody wants to answer the previous question, but I want to add on to my previous question, that social media, for example, in the last, I would say in the last 10 years or so, of course, has been both a boon and a bane. One, it did allow democratization of opinion. It did allow democratization of different points of view, which were earlier, in a way, a privilege of the elite, or a privilege of the intellectuals and the intelligentsia in the world. In the last 10 years, I would say, because social media penetration rapidly grew in the last decade. So I would say that, yes, it did give voice to many voiceless people in democracies. It did empower the most, I would say, underprivileged in many ways sections of society. But at the same time, we do know that it has had a very, very serious negative consequences as well. To cite a few, let me mention the case of Kashmir, for example. We know that the stone pelters, we know the rioters in Kashmir were mobilized using WhatsApp. were mobilized using Facebook, were mobilized using Twitter for violence on the streets. We know that Burhan Wani, for example, was the social media poster boy of Hizbul Mujahideen in Kashmir. We also know that in lot of instances of mob lynching, um, the trigger was a rumor spread through WhatsApp. The trigger was fake news spread on social media. We also know that in the case of the US presidential elections or overall US politics and US rhetoric that we heard in the last 4 years, many of which was challenged and countered, including by the President Donald Trump. And therefore, what we can really say is that on the one hand, yes, social media did empower the voiceless in democracies. It did decentralize information. Uh, it really took the information revolution to another level. But at the same time, it created unseen consequences because there was no regulation whatsoever. The Whether it was Facebook, whether it was Twitter, with hundreds and hundreds of pages of ISIS and Al Qaeda handles and whatnot. And now, after almost a decade, there's a crackdown, and the crackdown actually began um, with with social media giants like Twitter and Facebook, uh, banning, shadow banning, for example, the right wing views in the US by censoring right wing handles, not just in the US but also in India. Now, if these social media platforms, which have become much bigger than they were, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and now also do not have any accountability whatsoever, they have real impact in terms of either hurting your society physically. In the example of India, whether it was Kashmir, whether it was Delhi riots on CAA, whether it was the farm agitation, social media has not just, I would say, multiplying or magnifying or amplifying effect, but also in terms of violence, it can be an enabler. It has been an enabler, at least in India. In the US also, I would say Black Lives Matter, or for that matter, the second wave of protests, violent protests in Kawana, I would say hearings. We did see violence in the US way before January 6th, but we also noticed that social media platforms were completely complicit, not just mute or not just indifferent, but complicit in mobilizing those protests, in mobilizing that kind of violence which we saw on January 6th. But nobody was banned, including Nancy Pelosi, for example, who justified the destruction of statues, who justified the violence followed by Black Lives Matter movement, and many other people. If you really look at Alexandria, I can't really pronounce her name, but Alexandria Cortez and Ilhan Omar, they were continuously provoking you to come to the streets against Donald Trump, against the Republican Party, against Trump administration, and in favor of Black Lives Matter movement. So what I'm saying is essentially that social media or even mainstream media, for example, in the US, whether it was CNN, whether it was other TV news channels, who not only justified violence related to Black Lives Matter, but also endorsed it. Many, Kumo, for example, said that, this is what people do. I know this was Nancy Pelosi who said that. Kumo said that, some violence is all right. So what I'm saying is that social media, the way it functions, the way it has come together in collusion with partisan political groups in the US, in India, it is having a real impact on life. If it's going to mobilize protests, if it's going to facilitate lynch mobs, then are we really okay with having this monster out there without any regulation? Because we really are supporters of free speech, we are supporters absolute free expression, or do we really need to treat them, again I would repeat my question, treat them like publishers, treat them like mainstream media is? There is an entire code which is applicable to the mainstream media, but there is none on Twitter and Facebook and other such platforms. So to the previous question, to the previous point, the one of the panelists made was that we should not really moderate them, we should not regulate them. But then, do we? Who is going to take responsibility for the violence, for the mobilization of youth, for the radicalization of youth who come to the streets?
Ma'am, I have
I'd like to.
Ma'am, I would like to.
Okay,
okay.
so thank you. So, ma'am, I'd like to add to what you just said by pointing out that social media has often become a platform to, encourage vigilante justice, aside from radicalist ideas. But the same argument can be made for mainstream media as well. There has been a long line of victim shamers on any mainstream media. Monica Lewinsky scandal. It's not called the Bill Clinton scandal, is it? When she was part of the problem. So I think when we speak in this context, at least, we should include the role that mainstream media plays in all of this, and the role that mainstream media plays in social media. A lot of people share articles and stories posted by media houses, posted by CNN or Fox News on their social media. So media houses have taken to social media as a platform where they can say things without repercussions. And that it causes a ripple effect for people to think that it's okay for them to do that as well. I think we're being very one-sided here by blaming social media and its lack of moderation alone. We should also include the role that mainstream media plays, because Fox and Friends. Oh,
Exactly. I would agree with me, Neha here.
Let me intervene before you go on with your argument. Let me intervene for a bit. Yes, you can fault mainstream media for the kind of narratives that it has been peddling, or and you can also draw similar analogies where mainstream media might have provoked, say, for example, a mob. In fact, there have been instances where mainstream media, for example, in Gujarat riots, has been accused of, mobilizing more riots.
instigating violence.
Similarly, mainstream media has also been accused of actually leading to further violence. In, for example, during the Mumbai terror attacks, when one of the journalists shared the location and the coordinates of some of the hostages. So you can definitely make that point. However, I am making a slightly different argument. I am saying that mainstream media is still answerable. There are laws. There are laws of the country, of the land. For example, in India, there is an entire set of laws under which the press is sued. But when it comes to Twitter or Facebook or WhatsApp, none of the laws of the land are applicable. You understand my point of view? none of the laws are applicable. If you really want to hold mainstream media accountable in India, or whether the US, at least for India, I can say that there are laws, and then there are bodies like Press Council of India, even though it is completely almost defunct and does not really have any powers or hasn't done enough. What I'm saying is that somebody in this country can sue, whether it's NDTV or the Times of India or Times Now or Republic. But somebody, any citizen of the country can sue any of these channels or newspapers. But uh, suing Facebook and Twitter almost, in fact, not almost, but actually has no effect whatsoever. That's my question.
Ma'am, I have something to speak about it, and also your many of your previous questions. So the first question that you asked was basically about social media and the way of basically countering these things and looking on these things. There's a lot going on in social media right now. Since last 20 years, social media has grown a lot, and what has grown has social media has grown, but the laws have not kept up with the pace of social media, especially. So what I want to say here is that are we really comfortable giving these big tech companies, which are driven by profit mechanism and capitalist nature, who have special interests, basically their owners have special interest and their contributors have special interest, their investors have special interest, and in a society like the United States, where these big tech do donate a lot to certain parties through PACs and through many other mechanisms, through caucuses, are we really comfortable giving these social media powers such accountability and power so that they can cancel someone? Right now, what we are seeing is that Donald Trump is getting cancelled from every platform and stage. That may be good for some people and some ideologies, but that may not be good for everyone. Because this really sets up a dangerous precedent forward. On the other hand, what I want to say is that what we are seeing now is that there is a continuous thing going on in social media also of segregation. We are seeing that new platforms are coming up, like Twitter is a leftist platform now by many means, and Parler, a app which many of you may not have even heard of, is a conservative platform which is being banned by Apple and Amazon and Google to be put up on other platforms. So what we are seeing through here is a segregation in social media, and this thing of segregation will create two worlds in social media, which is also a dangerous precedent, where one can be monitored by big tech and the other cannot be. So basically, what I want to tell here is that my concern here is that are these big tech really that much democratic in their nature, because they are profit driven, and everything that is profit driven is not democratic. So are we really comfortable giving them this power? On the other hand, you also raised many questions about what happened in Kashmir, how Kashmir is, how stone pelting is being held. So I'm also from Jammu and Kashmir, and I have been quite into these things, and I have read about these things. How WhatsApp is basically used for stone pelting. I think India has been the Eastern democracies, or India especially, has been much more, responsive to curtail these things rather than the Western democracies because of their open liberal platforms and mechanisms. What has happened that the West has kept internet majorly free and open platform. On the other hand, China and India, they have been very much able to interrupt these things when they need it, and also interfere when they need. uh, on the other hand, we have been seeing that it's the platforms are too big, it's difficult to manage them. The NSA, that is National Security Agency of the US, it has so much capability that it can manage anything, and it basically looks everyone, and it basically manages everything in the US in the cyber realm. So making this as an excuse that we cannot really see everything is baseless, because the FBI knew 1 week previously that such attacks were being planned, such riots were being planned on the Capitol Hill. It was just that the government and the administration of that time didn't really do anything because they never had a will. We can compare this with the response of the Trump administration in coronavirus, because the US economy was booming so much, he didn't want it to shut it. Like that also, he had no gain in shutting any capital riot, because basically that was for him. So also, on the other hand, what I want to see is that some platforms, through these algorithms of these big techs, and some people through these algorithms are given much more power, like AOC. So AOC gets viral really fast, while on the other hand, the other conservative people don't get viral very fast. So there is something fishy going on, and we need to look on that also. So these big tech should be managed in such a way that it is unbiased, and that is we have to do what we have.
Just adding here,
Hari, sure. Okay, Hari, I completely agree with some of the points you made, but social media already has that power. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram already have the power to just block people. We're talking about giving them responsibility. What Aarti ma'am has been saying so far is not, social media power should be curtailed. It's that they should be made responsible for the amount of power they have. We should be responsible for what we share on social media, and that's one part. And the second part is big tech, NSA can't act on all intel it receives. It has to be actionable, and it has to be constitutionally derived. You can't take information that you got by wiretapping and use it as actionable intel. That's not how democracy works.
no, but
So
at the same time, Neha, when we are talking about,
I would request everyone, the chair will be asking the questions and calling the representatives. So I would request one at a time, please. Thank you.
yeah, can I continue?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, the point which Harsh was exactly making here, and I think I agree to that, is the ones with more power, the ones with more capital, are we? The Facebook, Instagram, FB, we all know about all these platforms, but other platforms like Parler, they have been banned because they do not really, social media is more promoted by tech giants. Now, if some particular platform is not really supporting a capitalist mentality and giving more power to, let's say, governments as in a very conservative ideology, then they would not want that to be given to people. So that idea of something going, something which go is the idea that something fishy is going on is absolutely right. And yes, absolutely, I agree that you're talking about a mechanism that could hold these people accountable. Now, we have to very carefully understand that social media is a platform. Even though, let's say, Facebook is, let's say, the Twitter is considered to be a leftist by many means. I'm not myself agreeing to that, but let's say it is being considered. But at the same time, there is another platform which is the so-called rightist platform. So both of them exist. Now, let's say if we set up a council, the councils will be generally government councils set up on national level, or let's say on international level. They would definitely be driven by interests of the government. Now, which will be very much in contrast with the capitalist or the ideals of these tech, the ideologies of these tech giants. And then the balance that is there on the social media, that you can express yourself completely freely, will go away. I will once again quote the starting the point which I made, as to we have to trust the rationale of people. Educate people to how to use a knife as to what is the purpose of it.
So I think that's a repetition. Does somebody else want to pitch in before I move on to the next question?
Yes, yes. I would like to add to the.
Has not spoken before.
Ma'am, we have
Ma'am, I would-
Pranjal here to share her points, and even Ashraf.
Okay, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. So, I would like to say, like, with American democracy coming up, under great threat last week. There is much stronger case now for ushering enough sophisticated regulatory mechanism to oversee dissemination of information on social media without restricting the benefits these platform provides, because we can see it mobilized social media mobilized Black Lives Matter, but it's about the matter which is being discussed. The information should be correct, so these tech giants should take responsibility. And I mean, social media should not continue to roam free of accountability, and the compliances that are rightly mandatory for traditional media like newspapers should be applied to social media as well. I would like to say that we need to organize digital space with clear rights, obligations, and safeguards. We need to restore trust in digital space. We need to keep a check on the information that is being disseminated, because Cross rightly said that misinformation is more dangerous than disinformation. So we need to, and also federals of the USA confirmed that they observed an activity before the attack at Capitol. So they should have stopped right there. So there should be much more accountability, and a swift action should be taken.
Okay, some the other panelists who wanted to speak.
Ma'am, I would like to give some points. Can I?
Yeah.
Ma'am, we had Ashraf first and then Ragni. So can we have this order, please?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
All right. So I would like to start my statement with a very important point, that is, social media has no discipline and hence no verification. The point that arises here is that social media has been very reluctant as to take a responsibility, and they don't want to be seen as editors of publications. Now, with the entire episode, be it in United States or here in India, we see that social media is there to trigger. We have seen violences triggering here in India, and the past year, that is 2020, we have seen the Bangalore riots and the Telnipara riots in West Bengal taking place all out of a social media post which had no verified ground. This is a rising concern because surfacing controversies of finding regarding the consumption as well as the censorship of free speech and the social media platform limitation is going on without any government intervention. If we go over the meaning that has been attributed to social media, also called handles like Facebook and Twitter, according to the Information Technology Act of 2000, these handles are mere intermediaries. They don't take any responsibility of becoming any authentic source. It is significant concern for a country like ours, where social media platforms enjoy up to 80 crore unique users. Keeping aside the fake accounts and all of that, there's no data concealing that. So some studies do indicate that such platforms, by discriminatory use of algorithms or direct intervention, have regularly influenced democratic opinions, and the elections in large democracies like USA is a standing example to it. So this is really an alarming feature for countries like ours, which is the largest democracy, and we need to take note of these developments. It is very easy to put a ban on somebody once a charge is already being filed. But before that, nothing happens. I mean, there has been cases and facts being peddled that the entire mafia that took place in Capitol Hill is a resultant of past 4 years. But then there is no responsibility to it. So social media is in a way falling in the same line as of actual media, that is not segregating into a political line. Here we need stiff actions. I would like to mention the case of Uganda here. Uganda has banned all social media ahead of presidential elections, and the government has been very stiff to mention that the ban was in retaliation for Facebook blocking some pro-government accounts. And this is the same case here in India. We have seen some accounts going disabled and there are no tracks. It happens mainly with the right wing here, but the paddling factor goes same. And where the factors really need to be checked out, that is which have fueled violence and claimed a lot of it, they go unchecked. So with this, I would like to conclude this statement with a single fact, and in continuation to my another panelist, Pranjal, that disinformation is worse than misinformation. Rather, Disinformation is purposeful misinformation.
Okay, so next.
I would start with the point that it's true that we have a freedom of speech and expression, right? But there is a very fine line between a free speech and a dangerous speech. We need to understand that. And dangerous speech is never good for any media or social media, because it is at at that stage the people are influencing others, and they're attacking, or not even attacking, they're just making a more worse situation, because it can be controlled or it could be avoided. But and no right is absolute. Even the right of freedom to speech and expression is being limited under Article 19.2. And we have to see what are the rules, what are the regulations which we are binded with. Of course, we can't see anything against a sovereign country. We can't state anything against our friendly relationships with other countries. So we have to maintain that. So I would just conclude with it that we should understand, we are that much knowledgeable that what is a free speech and what is a dangerous speech. So don't avoid those rules. These are important and these are needed to be mandated.
But who will decide
Thank
what's
you.
dangerous and what's
Okay,
not?
let me summarize a couple of points which I think are important. I think one of the panelists mentioned that there is a tendency or a trend that social media, like the mainstream media, is also going to get segregated. And I think, the view of the panelists was that it may not necessarily be a great idea. Well, I think when you really look at the mainstream media, the way mainstream media has evolved, whether it's in the US or in India, it's quite clear that increasingly it is ideologically driven in one or the other way. If you look at the American media landscape, most of the news channels are seen as the left leaning. In fact, in the US, it is quite normal and quite a norm that news organizations, newspapers, news channels, they come out openly endorsing one or the other presidential candidate. We do not have such a system here. In fact, I would rather have an open system where news channels and newspapers openly declare themselves as one or the other, ideologically or philosophically driven, instead of pretending to be neutral or completely objective. The readers and the viewers that way, I think, can decipher and analyze information that is given to them in a much more I would say effective way. The second point I want to say is that that in the US, if CNN and if Washington Post, New York Times, they are not just seen as left-leaning, but they are themselves self-admittedly left-leaning or say liberal-leaning. It is quite natural that the other section of society which feels differently, it is also going to push and encourage and promote its own platforms. And that is the reason we have segregation of platforms in the US. In India, we are increasingly moving in that direction as well. If you look at TV news channels, we have, unfortunately, instead of calling them left-leaning or right-leaning, liberal or conservative media, we have reduced ourselves to caricature by calling each other Godi media and Darbari media. But essentially that also reflects the public, the nature of the public discourse. That also reflects the kind of evolution we as a society has achieved through public discourse. So segregation.
We have Jasim left. Jasim left.
Segregation of media is going to be a natural course of I would say overall society. It's completely okay if you have Financial Times, if you have The Economist, seen as liberal or seen as a liberal news platforms. It is all right for somebody else to claim themselves. For example, in the US, we have think tanks who self-admittedly are conservative or libertarian. In India, we are not there yet. We just want to hide ourselves behind the facade of objectivity and the pretense of being neutral. We are not. No media is neutral. As one of the panelists did say earlier, that there is a lot of crony capitalism behind media setup, media platforms, and that is true. Without capital, you cannot expect a media organization to function the way it does. Lot of resource is invested into collecting information, into broadcasting that information, into propagating that information, and then taking it to the world. So there is a cost involved in that propagation of information or that opinion or idea. But now we are seeing that with these big tech companies, which have escaped any accountability because there's a certain section in the US laws which grants them that immunity, and also they get to enjoy that impunity because there is no law which controls or regulates them. Then the second issue is that if capital is the reality of media, can you really say that any media is going to be completely bias free or prejudice free? Well, the reality is that there is no prejudice free or bias free media. They all have sides. The only issue here really is that media should be held accountable for one, fake news, and second, it should be held accountable for the slander or defamation, especially when you have absolutely zero evidence against somebody. Third, of course, is the nature of data algorithm that many of the panelists have raised. Algorithm is cheating on people. The kind of algorithm Facebook uses based on the preferences of the consumer, based on what consumers want to read and what their lives are about, who they are connected to, who they are related to, and then content is designed to focus on him, to target that consumer, clearly shows that a lot is happening without the consent and permission of the consumer. The consumer does not know why he is reading what he is reading or why he is watching what he is watching. On television and newspaper, there is a certain freedom to choose. You are choosing newspapers that you want to read. You are choosing to watch the news channel that you want to watch. But what you are seeing on your Facebook page or what you are seeing on Twitter, a lot of it is really artificial numbers. A lot of it is something that you cannot comprehend. So that is the problem with the social media, and that's why we are debating social media more than we are debating mainstream media today. But that is not to say that mainstream media should not be held accountable. In fact, just today I was watching a video in which Democrat after Democrat justified the violence during Black Lives Matter movement, or the kind of protests, the rioting that was happening in the Capitol Hill. There were liberated zones in the Capitol Hill, but no accountability was fixed on social media, which was promoting such ideology and was promoting such reckless anarchy. So in constitutional democracies, I think it is important that the social media is judged and also reined in by the same laws as are applicable to the mainstream media. The third point I want to mention here is how political parties, and I would say this is across the aisle, are also, for you may have read and you may have also seen, there has been a lot of noise about IT cells. What are these IT cells? What is this creation of, millions and millions of bots who are pretending to be human beings on social media? The phenomena of left-wing leaders or icons in the US who are retweeted or who go viral with one of their most inane tweets. But if somebody is making a sensible point, you will see that there's hardly any traction to that. So there is lot of, I would say, wrongdoing, malfeasance, and lot of I would say this is almost a reckless, completely control free and completely unaccountable machinery that has been allowed to function to promote a certain ideology, to promote a certain political group, to also promote certain businesses, as somebody was pointing out. The capitalists who are funding a lot of icons who become overnight stars on, say, social media. People from nowhere came and they became social media stars and social media influencers because somebody is backing them, somebody is investing in them, somebody is putting an entire IT cell in their favor and promoting their views, promoting their ideas, and promoting and projecting them as social media influencers. So there are many things about social media which we have not paid attention to, and now Twitter or Facebook, who all other big media, tech groups, which in collusion banned President Donald Trump and banned hundreds and hundreds of US conservative handles. They have woken up only after January 6th. Before that, they were allowing this to build up. Even now, a lot of people who actually said that Trump should be killed, they still are on social media without any penalties. So my point, I think, here is this, that social media has become such a monster that most of the governments in the modern democracies have not really paid attention to their functioning, to what they are doing to society psychologically, not just psychologically, but emotionally and also physically. There has been very little understanding of how these social media platforms are fomenting violence, how they are radicalizing youth. If you look at the ISIS, for example, what was their biggest weapon when they were slaughtering people? It was social media. For the longest time, YouTube did not ban their videos. For the longest time, Facebook did not ban the jihadists who were openly calling for caliphate in Kashmir. So essentially, if there is no mechanism,
question, if I'm really sorry to interrupt, but if the question is, should we really be allowing social media giants, the tech giants, to ban people? They cannot be given that power, and at the same time government cannot be given that power, because then government's going to promote that right-wing politics which they have, or let's say a conservative ideology, or whatever that particular government is going with. Now social media, unlike the mainstream medias, the newspapers, etc., because of this freedom, this characteristic, yes, of course there should be some sort of regulation, but that regulation should not be to an extent which is there, and that's the beauty of social media. The beauty of social media is that a government officer can the prime minister can also be held accountable by a commoner. Now I cannot do that on NDTV, let's say. I won't be given a slot to speak about it. At the same time, I won't be given such a column in, let's say, Times of India to hold accountable any of the policies going about. This is the power of social media. Now let's say if we give power to any one particular government organization, or we form some laws against it, it will.
I think I understood your point. I think there is no disagreement on the issue that social media really empowered ordinary people, common masses across the democratic world. The problem here is not, I don't think anyone will dispute or disagree that social media has been an enabler of democratization also. But there are many of these, negative aspects of social media which need to be reined in. And when you say regulation, or when we talk about laws regulating, for example, social media, cannot in a democracy, for example, in China, it's a different ball game altogether. In Russia, it's a different ball game altogether. But in democracies,
people are not happy in Russia or China.
Let me finish my point. You can speak later. In democracies, laws,
Chair, just 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Laws are formulated by parliaments. Laws need to be ratified by parliament, which means it will be democratically legislated. Laws will not, if and people whom we elect to parliament, they're not, they are the people in whom we pose faith, in whom we keep, in fact, they are the, in a way, the guardians of our constitution and guardians of our laws. So people will decide in democracies what kind of laws should regulate these social media platforms. What I'm saying here is that to give so much power to corporate backed entities without any accountability and transparency and without any regulation and modulation, we are creating a super state. We are creating something bigger than the constitution. We are allowing an entire parallel entity, which is not even Indian. For example, Twitter and Facebook and all these platforms, none of them are Indian entities. These entities have become a super state in India, where the sovereign should be the state that has been elected by its own people. In China and in Russia and in other autocracies and theocracies, for example, their laws are dictates, their laws are dictums, either handed out by one party or by one ruler or one dictator or one military. But in Indian democracy, in the US democracy, an entire people, whether it's the US, in the US it will be both the Congress and the Senate which will have to ratify such a law or regulation. In India, it will be Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha together who will ratify that decision, whether in which way. For example, maybe it would be an inter-party committee or an inter-party council which will regulate or which will decide what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Thank you to all the panelists and the chair for sharing a quite an interesting take on role of media and social media